Imagine standing in a restaurant, doing your job, when suddenly you're humiliated in front of everyone. That's exactly what happened to Marcus, a young waiter just trying to make a living. The manager mocked him, belittled him, even made him feel like he didn't belong. But what Marcus didn't know, someone was watching. Someone who had the power to change everything. And in a single shocking moment, the man revealed a secret that would flip the entire restaurant upside down. This is a story of courage, injustice, and the incredible power of one voice standing up against cruelty. You'll witness humiliation, tears, and finally, a triumphant victory that will leave you speechless. Stay with us, because what happens next is something you'll never forget. Welcome to Heroic Stories Hub, the place where ordinary people face extraordinary challenges. Here, we bring you real-life stories of courage, kindness, and moments that will move you to your core. Every story has a lesson. Every hero deserves to be remembered. Let's dive in and witness the heroism that changes lives.
Don't touch that tray. You'll ruin everything like you always do. The sharp voice cut through the warm buzz of the restaurant like a knife. Conversation stopped instantly. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the soft background music seemed to fade into silence. All eyes turned toward Marcus. He stood near table 7, holding a tray with 2 plates of pasta and a glass of sparkling water. His hands trembled slightly, the tray shaking just enough to make the water ripple. I was just serving table 7, Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Collins, the restaurant manager, stepped forward with slow, heavy steps, his polished shoes clicking loudly against the floor. His face was tight, his lips pressed into a thin line of irritation. "You don't just serve, Marcus," Collins said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mess things up. That's what you do." A soft murmur spread across nearby tables. Some customers leaned back in their chairs, uncomfortable. Others avoided looking directly at the scene, pretending to focus on their meals. Marcus felt every pair of eyes on him. "I checked the order twice, sir," Marcus said, trying to stay calm. "Oh, I'm sure you did," Collins replied, rolling his eyes dramatically. "And yet somehow you still manage to look confused every single time." A quiet chuckle came from one corner of the room, quickly silenced when others glanced over disapprovingly. Marcus swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. He tightened his grip on the tray, trying to steady his hands. "I'm just trying to do my job," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Collins stepped even closer now, lowering his voice, but not enough to stop others from hearing. "Your job?" Collins said coldly. "Your job is to not embarrass this restaurant, and yet here you are doing exactly that." Marcus's chest tightened. He could feel the heat rising to his face. His ears burned as the weight of humiliation pressed down on him. He had worked here for 6 months. 6 months of early mornings, late nights, double shifts, and constant effort. He had memorized the menu, helped train new staff, and never once called in sick. But none of that seemed to matter right now. "I'm sorry, sir," Marcus said quietly, lowering his gaze. "Sorry doesn't fix incompetence," Collins snapped. At a nearby table, a middle-aged woman frowned deeply. She leaned toward her husband and whispered something under her breath. Another man shook his head slowly, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Marcus carefully lowered the tray onto a nearby stand, afraid that if he held it any longer, his hands might give out completely. "I can fix it," Marcus offered, trying to regain control. Collins let out a short, mocking laugh. "Fix it?" he repeated. "You think this is about fixing one order?" He straightened his posture and raised his voice slightly again, making sure the entire room could hear him clearly.
"This is about standards," Collins declared, "and you don't meet them." The words hit Marcus like a punch. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His mind raced, searching for something, anything to say, but nothing came out, just silence. A young couple sitting near the window exchanged uneasy glances. The woman looked like she wanted to say something, but her partner gently shook his head. Marcus felt smaller with every passing second. "I've given you chance after chance," Collins continued, pacing slightly now, "but clearly you don't belong here." Marcus's heart dropped. Those words cut deeper than anything else. Not belong. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It felt personal. "I do belong here," Marcus said suddenly, his voice quiet but firm. Collins stopped walking. The room went completely still. "Oh," Collins said slowly, turning back toward him, "you really believe that?" Marcus hesitated, but then nodded slightly. "Yes, sir," he said, nervous but determined. For a brief second there was silence. Then Collins smirked. "That's your problem. You don't know your place." A few people gasped softly. Marcus's confidence shattered instantly. His shoulders dropped. His eyes fell to the floor again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Collins waved his hand dismissively. "Just go to the back and clean something. At least that way you won't mess up in front of customers." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." He turned and began walking toward the kitchen. Each step felt heavier than the last. He could feel the stares following him, some filled with pity, others with discomfort, and a few with quiet judgment. But none of them stopped him. None of them spoke. As he pushed the kitchen door open, his vision blurred slightly. He blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the tears. Behind him, the restaurant slowly returned to life. Conversations resumed, though softer than before. Forks clinked against plates again, but the energy had changed. Something uncomfortable lingered in the air, something wrong. And in the far corner of the restaurant, a man sat quietly at a table by himself. He had been there the entire time, watching, listening. His face remained calm, unreadable, but his eyes had not missed a single moment. He slowly placed his glass down, and for the first time, he leaned forward slightly, his attention sharpening, because what he had just witnessed was not something he was going to ignore. In the kitchen, Marcus finally let himself breathe. The hum of the refrigerators and the hiss of the ovens felt almost comforting compared to the tension on the floor outside. He leaned against the cold metal counter, closing his eyes, and for the first time, the tears he had been holding back all afternoon fell freely. "I don't deserve this," he whispered to himself, his voice breaking. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, and the faint smell of garlic and sautéed onions filled the air, but Marcus barely noticed. All he could feel was the weight of humiliation pressing on his chest. Each word from Mr. Collins echoed in his mind sharper than any knife. "Your best is a liability. You don't belong here." He wiped at his eyes with the back of his sleeve, but it did little to stop the trembling in his hands. The shame had left him raw, exposed, like everyone had been watching him and had seen the worst version of himself. "Marcus," a soft voice called from behind him. He jumped slightly and turned. It was Sam, another waiter who had worked there for a few years. Sam's face was gentle, sympathetic, but also strong, like someone who had seen hardship but refused to be broken by it. "Hey, don't let him get to you, man," Sam said quietly, his tone gentle but firm. Marcus shook his head, trying to push the tears away. "It's not just today, it's every day," he admitted, his voice small. "I know," Sam said. He leaned against the counter beside Marcus, lowering his voice even further. "I see it, man. I see the way he talks to you, the way he looks at you. It's not right. You're the hardest worker here. Everyone knows it." Marcus blinked, his throat tight. "Then why does he treat me like I'm nothing?" Sam hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. Some people, they only care about power. They measure everything by how they feel they're better than someone else. It has nothing to do with you. Marcus let out a shaky breath, trying to absorb Sam's words. But before he could respond, the kitchen door swung open with a loud bang, making both of them flinch. "Marcus!" Colin's voice boomed from the doorway. Marcus stiffened, his hands trembling again. He turned slowly. "Yes, sir?" "Get back out there and try not to embarrass this place again." Marcus swallowed hard. The weight on his shoulders felt unbearable, but he nodded silently. "Yes, sir." He straightened his uniform as best he could, trying to calm his shaking hands. Sam patted his shoulder lightly. "You've got this, man. Just breathe." Marcus walked back into the dining area, each step heavy but determined to keep some shred of dignity. He passed table after table, sensing the stares of customers who had witnessed the earlier humiliation. Some faces were sympathetic, some curious, and some indifferent. The eyes of strangers seemed heavier than Colin's words, and Marcus felt every bit of it. Then he noticed him, the man in the corner, the quiet figure who had been watching the whole ordeal. He raised his hand slightly, almost imperceptibly, and nodded at Marcus. Marcus hesitated. He glanced back at Collins, who was standing near the bar, arms crossed, watching him like a hawk. Marcus's chest tightened. He knew that taking an order from a customer right now felt like walking a tightrope, but there was something about this man, something calm and confident, that made Marcus want to try. "Of course, sir," Marcus said, forcing a polite smile. The man leaned back slightly in his chair and studied Marcus for a moment. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone curious but steady. "Marcus, sir," he replied, still unsure of himself. "Well, Marcus," the man said, "you're doing just fine." Marcus blinked, almost unable to believe what he had heard. His hands, which had been trembling just moments ago, steadied a little. "Thank you, sir," he said, voice soft but full of gratitude. Across the room, Collins noticed the exchange. He frowned, his jaw tightening. He muttered under his breath. Marcus went table to table, taking orders, delivering drinks, and refilling water. Each step, each interaction was a quiet act of defiance. He focused on doing his job right, letting the quiet encouragement from the corner man guide him. Minutes passed. Marcus returned with the first round of meals. Carefully, he placed each plate in front of the customers, adjusting forks and napkins, making sure everything was perfect. "Everything looks perfect," the man in the corner said, a small smile on his face. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He managed a nod. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. Collins, watching this from afar, started to approach. His fake smile was stiff, his eyes darting between Marcus and the man in the corner. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Actually, no," the man said, his calm demeanor unwavering. The room seemed to shift again. Conversation slowed. Forks clinked softly against plates. All attention now focused on the table in the corner. Collins cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. What seems to be the problem?" The man leaned back slightly, his voice steady and clear. "The problem is how you treat your staff." Collins' face tightened. "Sir, you don't understand." "No," the man interrupted, voice firm. "I understand perfectly." Marcus froze where he stood, heart pounding. The quiet confidence in the man's voice filled the restaurant, demanding attention. Even the diners who had tried to ignore the earlier humiliation now leaned forward, curious, watching the tension unfold. The man continued, "I've been sitting here for a while, watching everything, and I cannot stay silent while someone is treated like this." Colin's mouth opened and closed, like he was struggling for words. He had never been challenged in front of the customers before. He was used to fear, to compliance, to blind obedience. But here, in this moment, Marcus was no longer alone. Marcus felt a small spark of hope ignite inside him. The crushing weight of humiliation had lifted slightly. Someone had seen, someone understood. The man's eyes turned towards Marcus, and he gave him a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement, a quiet promise that things were not over. Marcus swallowed hard. He returned to his duties, his steps lighter, his movements more confident. For the first time that afternoon, he felt seen. And all around him, the atmosphere in the restaurant had changed. Where there had been tension, now there was attention. Where there had been shame, now there was possibility. Marcus didn't know it yet, but this quiet man, this one customer, was about to change everything. And Marcus, standing tall despite the trembling in his chest, was ready for it. Colin's hands trembled slightly as he forced a tight, unnatural smile. "I assure you, sir, everything here is handled professionally," he said, his voice unconvincing. The man in the corner, calm and steady, raised an eyebrow. "Professionally," he repeated, slow and deliberate. The tone was not angry, but it carried the weight of authority, and it made everyone in the restaurant lean in, silent and tense. Collins shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his collar and clearing his throat. "Yes, professionally. We have standards here. Everything is fine." "No," the man said firmly, standing up. The chair scraped softly against the floor, and the sound seemed louder than it should have been. "No, it is not fine." The room fell completely silent. Customers paused mid-bite, servers stopped mid-step, and even the soft hum of the kitchen equipment seemed to fade. Every eye was now on this mysterious man and the man he defended, Marcus. Collins's face went pale. "Sir, I don't understand," he stammered. The man's gaze swept over the dining area, then locked on Collins. "I've been sitting here for over 30 minutes," he said slowly, "and I have watched you humiliate that young man in front of every customer in this restaurant. You have belittled him, shamed him, and treated him as if he were less than human." Marcus, standing nearby, could hardly breathe. His heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't believe what was happening. Collins swallowed, his mouth opening and closing as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. "Sir, that's not how it seems. I was just enforcing standards." "No," the man said firmly, raising a hand gently to silence him. "You are confusing power with respect. Leadership is not about making others feel small. Leadership is about lifting them up. You have failed at your job." Gasps spread through the restaurant. Servers whispered to one another. Customers looked around, stunned. Some had seen Collins's behavior earlier, some had ignored it, but now, hearing this stranger speak, the truth of what they had witnessed hit them fully. Collins stepped back slightly, his composure unraveling. "Sir, The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. He placed it on the table deliberately, and the room held its collective breath. Collins's eyes widened as he recognized the name. His confident, smug demeanor faltered completely. This can't be," Collins muttered, barely audible. The man met his gaze steadily. "I am the owner of this restaurant chain," he said, calmly. A wave of gasps swept through the restaurant. The murmurs grew louder. Customers looked at Marcus in awe. Servers exchanged glances, some whispering quietly, "I can't believe this is happening." Collins's knees felt weak. He stumbled back, clutching the edge of the bar for support. "Sir, I didn't know." The owner said, "You didn't know because you never cared to see. You treated your staff based on fear, on intimidation, and on your own ego, and now you are facing the consequences of your actions." Marcus could hardly contain his relief. His shoulders, which had been slumped with defeat all afternoon, straightened slightly. The crushing weight on his chest lifted a fraction. The owner turned toward Marcus, his expression softening. "Marcus, how long have you worked here?" 6 months, sir," Marcus replied, voice shaking but honest. "And during that time, have you always been treated this way?" the owner asked, his gaze steady and unwavering. Marcus hesitated. He glanced at Collins, who now looked utterly defeated. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, most days." The owner's jaw tightened slightly. "Then you have endured far too much," he said, his tone controlled but firm. "No one deserves to be treated like that. Not here, not anywhere." Collins stood frozen. He had no words, no excuses, no way to justify the months of cruelty, the public humiliation, and the fear he had instilled in his staff. The owner's voice echoed through the dining room. "You are finished here, effective immediately." Collins's face drained of all color. His mouth opened as if to protest, but no words came. He could only stand there, defeated, as the realization sank in. "There is nothing to explain," the owner continued. "Leadership is not about fear. Leadership is about respect, and you have failed every single day." Collins slumped slightly, the weight of shame pressing down on him. For the first time, he understood that power without integrity was meaningless. The owner then turned toward the room, his voice commanding yet calm. "To everyone here, let this be a lesson. This is not the kind of place we stand for. No one should ever feel small or powerless while doing their job." All eyes turned back to Marcus. The young waiter stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly, but now with anticipation rather than fear. The owner smiled warmly. "As for you, Marcus, I see dedication, patience, and strength, qualities that cannot be taught." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. "Thank you, sir," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Starting tomorrow, you will begin training as a supervisor. Your hard work and perseverance deserve recognition, and now you will have the opportunity to grow into the leadership role you have earned." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. He could barely believe it. 6 months of humiliation, of feeling small, of wondering if anyone noticed, had led to this moment. "Thank you, sir," he repeated, voice quivering, but this time it carried pride, not fear. The owner nodded. "You earned it, Marcus. Never forget your worth. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are." The tension in the restaurant slowly began to dissipate. Customers who had been witnesses to the earlier events now looked at Marcus with admiration. Servers whispered to one another, inspired by the courage and patience he had shown. Collins, still standing near the bar, avoided eye contact. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, heavy and inescapable. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be powerless. Marcus took a deep breath, letting the moment wash over him. The fear, the embarrassment, the frustration, they were still there, but now they were accompanied by a sense of justice, a sense of hope. The owner turned to the room one last time. "Remember this," he said firmly. "Every person here has value, every voice deserves to be heard, and every act of cruelty has consequences." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. He had survived the storm, and now, finally, he was recognized for who he truly was, a hardworking, kind, and strong individual who would no longer be defined by someone else's cruelty. As the owner left the table, Marcus straightened his shoulders. He looked around the dining room, seeing the customers, the staff, and the quiet acknowledgement in their eyes. Something had changed, not just for him, but for everyone present. A lesson lingered in the air, heavy but undeniable. Sometimes the people who were treated like they are nothing are the ones who deserve the most respect. And sometimes all it takes is one voice, one person who chooses to stand up to change everything. For Marcus, that voice had arrived, and his life and the lives of everyone who witnessed it would never be the same.